welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game.
Like playing swords. No, that's not a game.
It could be a game.
Yeah, probably.
Jousting. Panel?
Fencing.
Yeah, fencing.
I'm Ari.
I'm Charlie.
And I'm Josh. And
this is Trevor.
Trevor is phoning in for this discussion.
Hello.
He has turned into an oyster, kind of. It's actually a shelter.
Alrighty.
He's like Animorphs, you know? You ever read Animorphs? Probably a very good series.
My sister used to love Animorphs.
Yep. Well, Trevor's an Animorph.
Alrighty. We are going to be going over
Josh is a Yeerk, so be careful.
We're going over So We'll Go No More Roving by Lord Byron. Trevor picked this one, so Trevor, you're the discussion starter.
Well, my discussion question for this is basically, at what time in our lives do we decide that we've basically become too old for enjoying ourselves, or gallivanting, or going out a roving?
I'm in a bagpipe
If I
and
may
drum.
get a little philosophical here.
No, I mean, as I said earlier, I'm in a bagpipe and drum band. I'm always going out roving, and I have the Merriam-Webster definition.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. For roving. I mean, if you want to look it up, by all means, but it's not restricted as to location or area of concern. That's per Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, also a very good tool. But it depends on the person, as you were saying. Yeah.
I think I'm thinking about this right now because next year I'm going to be 30, and I was always thinking once you turn 30, once you turn 30, you have to have things. You should have everything laid out in a row. But my answer to your question,
that's not always the case.
My answer to your question, Trevor, is: does it really matter? Do we really need to settle down?
You know what? That's a better answer than when I said varies. When I said varies, that's kind of more what I meant, was what you said. Is that, you know, everyone goes at their own pace. Why does it really matter?
Yeah.
I think you have to think about the time period, though.
I think that, for his period, the life expectancy was lower, of course. But it also depends on settling down to do what? Why are you settling down? I mean, back in his day, I think it was a bit more standard to start a family.
Exactly.
You don't have to start a family
Josh,
in order
when you think of like retiring, people go on vacation. That's what's the roving? Is the roving retiring and not doing anything and just chilling out, or is the roving going on vacation after you've already retired? Like either way, see, it doesn't quite line up.
I think the Nipsey Russell poem really sticks out. He recited this on an episode of Match Game.
The game show?
Yes, the game show. It's something along these lines. To keep the economy going and making our nation strive.
So we'll no more a roving.
Give us our Social Security now. We'll go to work when we're 65.
I like that idea.
The song that I think of when I read this poem is Roy Orbison's "We'll Take the Night." Clarence Clemens did a great sax background to it. It pretty much has to do with, first I think of Roy Orbison during that time. It was during his comeback years, but he died before he was able to complete the comeback. He was in the his late 40s, early 50s range. This is about that need to settle. There's that question of whether or not do we really need to settle? And in that song, in We'll Take the Night, it's just making the most out of a singular situation, a singular moment in time.
Right.
So make the best out of it. Maybe think about settling down, but for now, live for the day.
And a lot of music, especially in that time, 60s, 70s, 80s, a lot of music was about being in that moment, but you know, I mean,
and the 80s was very much about. The 80s is a time that I hear so many great things about, and it would be an era that I would have loved to immerse myself and live. Aside from the whole idea of settling down, I think it should be viewed and admired for the image that it creates and the word choice. I think that it is just the third and fourth line. Though the heart still be as loving and the moon be still as bright, where you have that the world keeps going as it is. The world does not settle down.
Correct.
We settle down, but we also are not participating in the entirety of the world.
I like how you said entirety, because yes, the world itself will keep spinning. Things are going to keep happening, but in not by saying by including that phrase entirety, all of us we have cause and effect. So what we do now will affect future generations. What we do not do now will also affect future generations. So I know I'm bringing that into it now, bringing a different turn on it. But how are they going to go roving no more in 30, 50, 60 years? How are our kids, grandkids, how is it going to be, for them when the life expectancy is going to shoot up even more?
It depends. I don't know if the life expectancy is going to be shooting up.
Well, it's a thought, because I know I've said this hundreds of times, especially in our earlier videos. Washing your hands added another 15 years to your life, approximately, in that time. Middle ages. You live to 25, God bless you, my man. I'm okay, I'm good. Today, when you hear 25, you're thinking college, party, you're thinking, that's when you start to think, and sometimes it's earlier. People settling down, having kids, starting a family. People are starting their jobs. We also live in a constant state of anxiety. We're always worried. What are we doing now? What's this? What do we have tomorrow? We got to do this, and this. So it's a little hard to be in that moment too. Especially in today's world. We are so, myself too, that's what I'm saying, we, not you, myself, all of us, we are all consumed with some kind of anxiety, some worry. So it's a little hard to plan that retirement. It's hard to, and again, that's not for everybody. I don't want to say anything that's going to get me in trouble, but if you have, a lot of us are constantly worrying about what's going to happen in 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years for our kids, grandkids, etc.
So I have a completely different view of this poem. It's a view that makes this poem so good. I'm like, Trevor, Trevor, you're still there, right? Yeah, Trevor, I actually have not read this poem until you suggested it. I can understand, I can now get a fair point why you suggested this, as it almost fits your personality perfectly. And I think that, it just makes a lot of sense. But imagine, if you will, like there's a big dartboard here. You got a big dartboard, right? And you got the really small things in the middle, and then you got the 30-point section, and then the bigger section. In a way, So We'll Go No More Roving can actually describe to this dartboard. You've got the small stuff, the stuff in the middle, which is like today, just talking about today. Eventually the day is going to end, and that's when you will no more go roving. You will find somewhere to sleep, and yet the moon will still be beautiful, and everything will still be great. You'll have time to pause and breathe until you go to sleep and wake up the next day. Then you've got the next layer. It's almost like a sponge cake kind of.
I love cake.
You got the next layer where it's like, okay, it's talking about short-term goals. Where it's like, you work on the stuff that you feel for the short term, and eventually when you figure out what you want to do in the short term, so no more we will go roving, and that everything is still bright and everything is great, and you'll be able to pause to breathe because you've accomplished your short term goals. Then you've got the long term goals, and then after the long term goals you could say your entire life. And that this can apply to pretty much any aspect, any time of your life. Whether it be the smallest day or even the smallest hour, you could even go that small, to something as huge as applying it to your own life. And that is why I think this poem by Lord Byron might be one of the most brilliant poems, because I have never seen a poem layer itself like
cake.
Sponge cake, exactly. Yeah. Like, I've never seen
wedding cake.
No, even better, I mean, maybe not for you, but a better analogy would be like an onion, where you have to peel the layers off. Trevor, have you ever...
I like onions.
You've peeled onions before, right, Trevor? Right, so you kind of understand there's like a different layer. Imagine as though, like, each layer of your life can represent So We'll Go No More a Roving, where you gotta take the breaks you need, but everything is still just as good as it is in any other situation. And I mean, Trevor, I don't know what you think about this.
Seeing it that way, I would agree, but
Same.
I think that for its face value, it is very simply laid out.
I agree.
I think that be approaching it later on, it could be.
Sorry, I tend to.
With layers.
I tend to. You know me with poetry. I
Nothing
tend to
wrong
go
with that.
ridiculously crazy. But Trevor, again, I'm curious. Like what your thoughts are of the poem.
And I think my experiences with the poem were somewhat colored by the fact that out of all the social circles that I'm in, I'm pretty much one of the older of the bunch. I say one of. I don't honestly believe that I am the oldest of every one of them.
Yeah, I think you're the oldest here, though.
Depends on who's in the room.
But also older and wiser, right, Trevor?
Older and wiser, you get more Budweiser.
In my case, wiser, that's a matter of opinion. And I'm not self-talking. I'm just saying that one person's wisdom is another person's frivolity. Good heavens, I got that right, I think.
Well, here at Literary Gladiators, it's always wisdom.
I've just always thought of it as just a parable in prose. No, not prose. Poetry or possibility.
I wanted
last
to.
week's episode for that, folks.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, Trevor, I appreciate you bringing this poem to my attention. I knew a little bit about Lord Byron before I read this, but not enough to know about this poem. And I think that just you bringing this poem to my attention really is actually a really great thing. So I really appreciate that you suggested this poem. This might be actually one of my favorite.
I'm gonna let you all in on a secret. I didn't pick this poem up just because I knew about Byron. As a matter of fact, first I'd heard about it, I knew very little about him. I'd actually first heard this, or read this, depending on how you see it, in this chapter of Ray Bradbury's book, The Martian Chronicles.
Right, and it was just his 100th birthday a couple days ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As we're filming this, it was yesterday.
Yeah.
I wanted to add one last thing real quick, building on what you were saying earlier about how you see it as a large dartboard, sponge cake, yum. A lot of places of higher learning are also, to my knowledge, are using this for the incoming freshmen, and even I think in high schools as well. The incoming freshmen. Where do you see yourself in 3 years, or where do you see yourself after high school? Where do you see yourself in 10 years, 15 years, things like that? So where do you see yourself in 25 years? I had one of those assignments when I first began began college, and none of it was accurate because everything. Well, actually, part of it was, but a good amount of it was not as accurate as I wanted it to be. I was roving more than I thought I would be because it builds up on that dartboard cake theory.
Yeah, and just like a dartboard, every time you throw a dart, another hole pops up. It gets used, it gets worn down.
Yeah.
And eventually,
and every time you eat cake,
you need to replace the dartboard. That's a new segment of your life.
Yes. Yeah. And getting a new piece of cake.
Alrighty. Do we have final thoughts?
I was going to say, Trevor, that I think this is, so far, of the 4 suggestions you've given, and plus more, I think this is the best one you've given. I think this was an excellent poem. It's the one I appreciated the most, the one that stood out to me the most, despite it only being, just like the previous week's Emily Dickinson. It's only a couple of lines, but the lines are so powerful. Trevor, you are good at picking out individual poems, and I appreciate your insight.
Oh, I do my best.
Yes, thank you, Trevor. Thank you very much.
It is not frivolity or whatever word you use. It's definitely wisdom that I feel right now for you, or of you. Charlie's patting you on the head.
Referring to Ray Bradbury as for poetry reference, he did that too with Dover Beach in Fahrenheit 451. I think that was a great attribution to what it was that he was conveying in the piece.
That was the one where they had to burn the books, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Ray Bradbury he's a remarkable writer.
The Sound of Thunder.
Remarkable man.
I remember when we did the Sound of Thunder. That was great.
I hate thunder, by the way.
I know.
And Ray Bradbury, he was
Charlie.
just like Lord Byron. He would not let himself be held down. When it came to roving, he felt that there were no boundaries there either, because he lived to be 91 years old. He never obtained a driver's license. Didn't like cars at all. Never went to college. He thought that going to the libraries was enough. That was his form of college. He wrote Fahrenheit 451 in 9 days in the basement of UCLA's library.
That's impressive.
Back to this particular poem, it does say that there is that idea that we need to settle down at some point, but it creates a great conversation between you and the poet, which is always remarkable.
And just one more thought. Perhaps roving, I know you put the definition here, Charlie. It's
Wandering. Roving is synonymous with wandering.
I know. You put the definition, not restricted as to location or area of concern. This could be a whole nother discussion, which, I guess we'll spare it because it's going to be long. Instead of it being roving of the physical being, it would be roving of the mind.
Yeah.
Which could make open this whole thing up, but, I tend to go on with these things, so I will just leave that up to your interpretation, as Trevor would say, dear viewers.
Mm-hmm. And that is through the Merriam-Webster online dictionary.
Trevor?
Did anybody, you said you had one more thing to say?
No, I said everything I had to say.
You said everything you had to say. So if you're interested... Yeah, you're always hungry.
I know.
If you're interested
if you're hungry, go to Sam's Delicatessen.
Trevor, go!
Trevor sent you.
Tell him.
The Mentor Book of Major British Poets, edited by Oscar Williams. This is where I found this particular poem, So We'll Go No More Roving, by Lord Byron. This has everyone from William Blake to Dylan Thomas. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.
Keep reading and keep roving.
Keep reading and roving and reading.
Hi there, this is Josh, and on the next episode of Literary Gladiators, Ari, Trevor, Charlie, and I will be discussing Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. If you like what you see on this channel, please support us on Patreon, for the money that we get will help us provide you, the viewer, with more material. Thank you, and for now, keep reading.